When you talk about mid-majors that have consistently played at a high level over the past few seasons, you can't leave out the Liberty Flames. 6 straight winning seasons, looking like a chance at another NCAA tournament bid this time around. I'm Mat Mlodzinski. I'm joined by Liberty head coach Ritchie McKay as a part of our Preview to March series, also heard on the Review podcast. Coach, I hear you're in Kentucky. You got some bad weather on the way. Are you doing good other than that?
Doing great, even in spite of the impending weather forecast, Matt. Just a great day to be alive, and love what I do and who I get to do it with, or whom I get to do it with. So there's a great blessing in that.
Can't complain with that at all. Coach, I'll bring you right into this season. I'll kind of start with one quick one from the off season. You guys didn't have as much roster overhaul as really the majority of college basketball did, but obviously still a few new faces and obviously a new season. But that 1-3 start to the season, was that, when did it kind of seem like things started to kind of get together to where you wanted it this season? Because obviously, you never want to start slow.
Yeah, Matt, good question. I think the 1-3 start was completely my fault. There was the collision of the transfer portal and student athletes being immediately eligible at their new institution, as well as the COVID relief year and everyone getting an additional year. And we took neither. We didn't have any transfers. And our two seniors who had a lot to do with our success, Chris Parker and Elijah Cuffey, didn't take COVID years. They went and signed professional contracts. So, man, the thing I noticed early, and we lost to LSU, Iona in a really good game, and then Manhattan drilled us. Manhattan's the oldest team in college basketball, and Iona and LSU, both talented but both really experienced. And we were throwing some freshmen out there that really were deer in the headlight. And no disrespect to any of those teams, because they're all really good. They're having great seasons. But I think I overly challenged our guys early. But I'm okay with that, because I think the residue of that is we've seen improvement, and we've seen it against really good competition. So I think growth always occurs, Matt, when you're stretched a little bit. And I think that's been indicative of our season thus far.
Well, obviously we were able to see that turned around pretty quickly. You guys had that win over a Missouri team. Now I know they're under 500, but they're a team that took, Auburn pretty far down to the wire. East Carolina, Northern Iowa, and a couple other games against Stanford and BYU out west. Coach, I guess what I'm getting at is having all those games before your Atlantic Sun schedule. What's the big benefit of it? You kind of mentioned it already, but, how do you think it really helps once we get towards March?
Yeah, I think, like you mentioned earlier, the likes of LSU or Iona, Stephen F. Austin, and even the games in Hawaii, I just think your goal as a coach should be to prepare yourself the best way you can for a really competitive conference season. And with the addition, our league was already good, but with the addition of Central Arkansas, Eastern Kentucky, and Jacksonville State, who beat us at home, I think for me, although it's really hard to schedule, when you kind of reach a certain point as a mid-major, a lot of my friends have shared the same thing, and it's a compliment, don't get me wrong, but you just don't have the same access to games that you may have had before you won a game in the tournament or won your league. But I think the objective was accomplished, Matt. I think it's prepared us well for a really good conference.
And now, I know you mentioned earlier the Jacksonville State game. Coach, I'm going to get to that in a little bit, but I really couldn't go much longer without mentioning Darius McGhee, because I feel like when you look at players around the country, you just have to look at his scoring ability, one of the best three-point threats in the country. How has he really taken that leadership role and his scoring role and up to even more from last year to this season?
Yeah, Matt Darius is easy to root for, man. He's even easier to coach. I told one I'll just say one pro personnel person that, he could legitimately score 40 and we lose, or score 2 and we win. And he would be much happier about the result of the latter or the performance in the latter than he would the former. And I just don't think there's many people like that. Now he can create a shot for himself or his teammate as well as anyone I've seen. He's really unique like that. And the best thing about him, well, I'd say it's twofold. Number one is humility. His teammates love him. He's very selfless, sacrificial, but he's got the ability to create offensively for himself or a teammate. And he has done that by the ownership and improvement. And I just think when you have a player like that, I think I don't want to say he's once in a generation, because I hope we keep getting really good players like him, but even better people. But I will tell you, he's got a uniqueness about his game that I think is special. And I think he could, if we were fortunate enough to qualify for the NCAA tournament, I think he's one of those kids that the nation would embrace because of his small size and in height or whatever. But his glowing personality and his ability is really special.
So I feel like another thing that goes along with that, coach, is you get a player like that, and often it might come with, taking a hit as far as field goal percentage and efficiency goes. But you guys are 16th in the country in field goal percentage, 10th in 3-point percentage. Is that kind of Darius's play just rubbing off on everyone, or is it shot selection? I mean, that's a testament to something. What is it to you?
Yeah, good players. Really, we have a couple of assistant coaches that really work hard on individual development. And Derek Johnston, who's been on our staff for 3 years, he's been great for us, really tremendous teacher. And our guys own, the film work involved. And we try and recruit guys that have IQ that wants an opportunity to have more freedom. So I think it's the combination of a bunch of things, but most importantly, really good players.
I do want to take it to kind of a little bit of a negative, I guess you could say. The rebounding. You guys are okay on the boards, but especially on the offensive boards, like sub 300. And now I know that, again, takes a little bit into account when you got a 5'9" guard on the floor and Darius McGhee, such a tremendous player. You can't knock any of that. But, is it something to think about when you get to March? Let's say you guys match up against a bigger team. If you are fortunate enough to make the NCAA tournament, are you worried at all about the play down low, or is that something that I'm just overlooking?
Matt, it's part of our system, to be honest with you. If you look at our history, we've never been a good offensive rebounding team statistically, because we send a lot of guys back. And consequently, it's hard to get transition on a pack line defensive team. Virginia is a great example of that, although we don't do it as well as they do. So I don't ever look at our offensive rebounding statistics, to be honest with you. But I know on the Ken Palm, it's in really deep red. You don't want to be last in anything, I don't think. But I'm not overly concerned with it, because it's not part of our emphasis.
So what do you emphasize then, Coach? Is there something that you really bring in when you recruit players to this program? What's like the biggest emphasis as far as, okay, this is Liberty basketball?
Well, I think we want guys that fit the mission of our university in terms of being conscientious about your faith. And I think we want guys that are really invested in the we of what we do, and not just the me. Don't get me wrong. Like, you got to have good players who have individual goals and aspirations. And as a coach or as a leader, I think it's our responsibility to invest in those. So I want that. But I just feel like I heard a great quote, Matt, the other day. A pastor friend of mine said, it's really hard to be grateful for what you feel entitled to. And we really want guys that have a gratitude for the privilege it is to get your college education paid for, play at a place like Liberty, and have a chance to do life with some of the young people that we have in our program. So those are some of the attributes we look for. Obviously, guys that can shoot, pass, move, defend. Those are also prerequisites. You don't have to have them all, but you have to have more than you don't in order for us to probably offer you a scholarship.
For sure, coach, for sure. Quickly, I mentioned that I was going to get back to the Jacksonville State game. Obviously, the most recent loss, guys able to turn it around against Kennesaw State, though. But really, in that Jacksonville State game, only 6 free throws in that whole game. Is that something that you're trying to stress more to the team? I know that, the free throw attempts have been maybe around like 15 per game. Just kind of what are your whole thoughts on that?
Well, they're really good. Coach Harper does a fabulous job, and they deserve to win the game. So you can look at a host of statistics and point to why we lost there. To me, I think it's important to remember, no matter how good of a team you are, there's a chance you could lose every night. And if you don't embrace that, there's no, I hope I'm right in this, in Division I, I don't think there's a conference opponent that you can just show up and say, oh, we got this. Or because we've won this many games in a row, or we did this or did that here or there. That has zero to do with the game at hand. So I just think they played a lot better than we did. We didn't get to the line because we got behind, and we played catch up by shooting threes and maybe not executing our system, but they had a lot to do with that. So if we're fortunate enough to play them again, it'll probably be in a game of significance. So we'll see if we've improved by then. But along the way, Matt, you're going to have some losses. And if you look at those losses as indictments or as failure, you're going to have a frustrating season. You got to look at them as growth opportunities. And certainly we do. It's a chance to get better because they expose some of our weaknesses.
And you guys certainly have, obviously turning it around most recently against Kennesaw State. Coach, having such a veteran team, how easy is it then for your guys to be able to really take those losses in stride and be able to turn it around the next time they go out on the court?
Yeah, well, on paper, we have, I want to say, 5 guys that are upperclassmen. And if you count the COVID years, if those guys come back, we really have 3 that are upperclassmen. So we're still relatively young, Matt, although those 5 are pretty seasoned. I just think we have a connected group, and they're able to turn the page quickly because of their maturity. I think a lot of that has to do with, you might think this is a little bit obscure, but I think a lot has to do with the leadership that we have in our athletic department, and even some of the leaders on our campus. Like there's a real intentionality to be able to live in grace, because I think that promotes freedom. So our guys don't often get indicted by losses. Again, we're more so interested in the process, Matt, that, hey, here's today. This is a 24-hour period that we're granted, we're blessed to be granted, and let's just make the most of it. And if we can just keep stacking those days, we'll have a chance to improve, not just as players, but as people. And I really think our guys have bought into that, and consequently, it's maybe promoted a really healthy culture.
Culture always key to a program. Also, that's big there, Coach. I feel like that goes unsaid so many times to people behind the scenes that don't always get mentioned in the forefront. Before I let you go, Coach, I do want to take it into one more question. Just obviously you can tell I'm a big Liberty supporter. I mean, I think you guys, from the beginning of the season, I've thought that you guys could make a big run. You're my choice in my Maddie brackets to make the tournament out of the A-Sun. But how do you finish the season strong, and how are you going to get there? What's the big message over this final stretch?
Well, Matt, thanks for being a fan of ours. I'm certainly a fan of yours. I just think what I alluded to earlier, stacking the days. We have good players. It's a privilege to win your conference tournament and advance or be selected as an at-large. And we only have an opportunity as the former, not the latter. I think there'll be an at-large selection from our league. I do think when you add teams that added, I think hats off to our league office, because I think it's whoever represents the A-Sun is going to have a chance in the big dance, because there's been some really good games in our league's conference season so far. And so for us, I think improvement is critical. Obviously staying healthy and making sure that we're not just physically healthy, Matt, but we're emotionally and mentally healthy as well. I think that's really important to our cause, and we're going to try and I didn't even mention spiritually. We're going to try and invest in that on a daily basis and see if we can get the desired result in March.
Coach, always a pleasure to talk to you. Thanks again for joining. You're the first coach I brought on for this, so I hope that makes you feel special as well.
Yes, indeed, Matt. Thank you, man. Appreciate you what you do for college basketball, man. You're fun to follow.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Coach.